Subtle art of not giving a fuck. Cool little book, got a little bit of game on it, but so let's just get into a short story real quick before I start talking about the game that I got from this book. So the story goes in this book that I read that um there was a king in the foothills of the Himalayas in Nepal. The king was a very wealthy king and very rich king, and he had the idea that he was about to have a son, and he had the idea that he was going to raise his son in a life of luxury, privilege. He would spoil the son, and he would shelter the son from the outside world. The king actually went so far as to build walls around the palace so that his son wouldn't know what it's like on the outside world outside the palace. So the son, he grew up rich, spoiled. He had servants that catered to his every need, his every desire, and he had everything he wanted. So as he got older, the son actually became very angry, frustrated, and of course, very ignorant to the outside world. So he had the idea that he wanted to sneak out the palace and go see what it was like on the outside world. And what he saw was, of course, he saw the outside world. He saw bums, he saw people dying, he saw people suffering, he saw people suffering from disease. He saw, just complete poverty, right? So he went back into the palace and it horrified him, just completely flipped his whole world upside down. And he actually became more angry and more frustrated, right? So he had the idea that he was going to go and leave the palace and live as a bum. He was going to suffer through illness, hunger pains, loneliness, depression, just decay, just a life as a homeless person, um, and just as a bum overall, right? So he did this for years. This the son, he lived like this for years, and then eventually he came to the realization that it was a horrible idea, right? And of course, everybody on the outside world knows that living as a bum is not a good idea. Not a good idea, excuse me. But being that he was sheltered growing up as a kid, he didn't really understand that. So he came to the idea that living as a bum and as a homeless person was a horrible idea. And he went and sat under a tree by a river for, as the story goes, for 49 days, right? So after those 49 days, he came to the realization that people suffer. Life is about suffering. You're going to suffer. It doesn't matter if you're rich, doesn't matter if you're poor. As we see the son, he suffered when he was rich because he was always frustrated about the fact that he was sheltered. He didn't know what was going on in the outside world. Eventually, him getting everything he wanted and needed pissed him off, I guess, or eventually it just frustrated him. He suffered as a rich person, and then as he lived as a poor person, he suffered then. So his um, one of the realizations that he came to was the fact that everybody suffers. Life is about suffering, and there's really no point to resist pain or loss because it's something that doesn't matter who you are, it's something that you're going to have to deal with throughout your life. You're always going to be faced with problems. Now, this person actually turned out to be the Buddha. We all know who Buddha was. He was an extraordinary man, right? So he became the Buddha. He had all these philosophies, but the book also goes into suffering and how suffering can actually be somewhat of a good thing. But and as we all know, some people suffer more than others, but suffering helps you see what your mistakes were, so you don't make those same mistakes. It helps you determine what's right and what's wrong. It helps to point you in the right direction whenever you're in certain situations so that you don't make the same mistake twice, right? That's what suffering does. It helps you see what mistakes you made and to not make those same mistakes again, and you know to pay more attention to certain things whenever you're in certain situations. So the book goes into detail about suffering, but it also talks about one of the ways to achieve true happiness in this life is to figure out ways to overcome your suffering, to fix the problems that you're dealing with, and to overcome the problems, right? Now, the real problem that, according to the book, it says that the real problem a lot of people have with overcoming their problems and overcoming the suffering that they're going through is a lot of the times people are either in denial about their suffering or they play the whole victim role. So when you're in denial, you don't actually come to the realization that you're suffering. A lot of times you may do things to distract yourself from your problems. Um, may drink, smoke, fuck, whatever, but you usually do things to distract yourself from the fact that you're suffering instead of finding ways to overcome your suffering and fixing your problems. The victim mentality is a way that a lot of people tend to blame their suffering on other people or other things instead of taking full responsibility of why they're suffering, right? So instead of taking full responsibility of your suffering and finding a way to overcome your suffering, you tend to put the blame on other people, which tends to take a lot of pressure off yourself. But book goes into detail about one of the ways to achieve true happiness in this life is to fix your problems and overcome your suffering. First thing we all need to realize is that we are all going to suffer, and that is just a part of life. It doesn't matter who you are always going to be faced with problems throughout your life. Secondly, to not be in denial about your problems, to not play the whole victim mentality, but to figure out ways to overcome your suffering and to fix whatever your problems you're dealing with in order to achieve true happiness in this life. And we all know that, whenever we're faced with a problem, whenever we find ways to solve the problem, it's usually a big relief for us. It even brings some joy into our lives because we know it's something that's like a weight off your shoulder. You found a way to solve your problem and you find a lot more relief, right? So, yeah, that's pretty much some of the game I got from the book, some of the information I got from the book, which is to understand that throughout this life, everybody suffers, everybody is faced with problems. Don't be in denial about your problems, accept the fact that, you're dealing with some shit and don't place the blame on other people, accept responsibility for whatever you're dealing with and find ways to solve your problems in order to achieve a form of happiness. All right. So, subtle art of not giving a fuck. Till next time, I'm out.